Before we move on to session 2, a gentle reminder to all the speakers to keep their times. We're running a little bit late. And in session 2, we have 4 speakers. We will begin with, wait, is this procedurally just? Did I scare you? Don't worry, this is not a question, but this is the topic of our next speaker, Juana Lawson, the founder and CEO of Tacit Growth Technologies, Tacit Growth Strategies LLC, a global impact investment and PMO firm. And TGS is also the impact investment partner for this 3-day summit. Let's listen to her as she speaks on, wait, is this procedurally just? Highest ethical and governance standards, UN SDGs 16. Over to you, Juana.
Well, thank you so much, Aparna. I am going to share my slide presentation. We are going to be discussing procedural justice today because this is one of those topics. So again, our topic of discussion today is wait, is this procedurally just? My name is Juana Lawson. I go by the PMO CEO. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Tacit Growth Strategies. We are a management consulting project management office leading strategy for an environmentally sound, socially just, and inclusively governed tomorrow. We've been featured in the Oprah Magazine, Entrepreneur, Forbes, MarketWatch, and several other publications. So what exactly is procedural justice? When we talk about procedural justice, we're talking about when employees perceive that the processes that lead to important outcomes are fair and just. Procedural justice is based on the premise that the most fair and respectful decision will be made regardless of who it applies to. Procedural justice involves creating policies and procedures that take all perspectives and concerns into consideration. Procedural justice also involves decision-making that is based on fact and appropriate for the action. And finally, we have here, procedural justice ensures equity and fair treatment company-wide. Now, what most people are familiar with as it relates to procedural justice is law enforcement and court systems. So in the court systems, judiciary systems across the world, and within law enforcement specifically, we see this conversation, this notion, this topic of procedural justice is very common. When we think about law enforcement, the easiest example to think of or to consider is when you're driving, right? So you're driving your vehicle, you're driving a little bit too fast, you're going faster than the speed limit, for example, or you might come to a stop sign and instead of completely stopping, you have a rolling stop. Now, I'm guilty of this. I do this all the time and I need to stop it. We call it a California stop. I have to come to a full stop when I get to the stop sign. That's what we're supposed to do. A lot of us, however, are in a hurry and we don't stop completely. So what happens? The police officer might see us. They might, stop us on the road. They pull us over and they say, I'm going to give you a ticket today because you did not come to a complete stop at the stop sign. Are you going to feel that this was not procedurally just? Well, it depends on how they treat you, right? It depends on how the police officer treats you. It depends on how they come to that decision to give you that ticket. But the reality of the situation is that when we perceive that procedural justice is present, we understand that, we sort of accept the penalty. So if you know, for example, that you didn't come to a complete stop at that stop sign and someone saw you and that someone was a police officer and you end up getting a ticket, you're not going to necessarily feel that it wasn't procedurally just, right? You broke the law and you got fined or penalized for breaking the law. You understand that it had nothing to do with who you are as a woman. I'm just saying, for example, as a woman, as a Black woman, as a young Black woman, as an older Black woman, as an older, Asian woman. It doesn't matter who you are. The reality is that you broke the law the procedurally just repercussion for that applies across the board. Now think about that in the context of the organizations that you're working within. Procedural justice is not limited to court systems or law enforcement. Procedural justice, as it relates to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions, applies across the board. Okay, so what we're going to talk about next are those evidence-based best practices for founders who are driving the UN SDG number 16 as it relates specifically to procedural justice. So your highest ethical and governance standards, that's what we are constantly aspiring to as founders. Now here's some evidence-based best practices. Here are some qualities of what we like to say are really the foundation for the highest ethical and governance standards as it relates to SDG number 16. Your first one here is ethical leadership. Ethics should permeate all aspects of organizational operations, planning, and growth priorities. We should be incentivizing ethical leadership. We should also be very clear on what ethical leadership looks like within our organization. Impact and social entrepreneurship, as we know, in order to be really categorized as an impact or social entrepreneur, and this is for nonprofit businesses and for-profit businesses alike, in order to have that specific classification, you have got to have results that are both financial and ethical. You're generating results financially as well as ethically. Okay, you're a leader that embodies the principles that we find within the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of those goals. Plus, you are an effective leader because you can generate and sustain revenue. So you're driving financial and ethical returns as a visionary and a lead change agent. The next quality here is principles and procedures. We've had previous speakers talk about the importance of governance. You cannot have a high ethical standard within your organization if there's not procedural justice. Governance is how we're able to then evaluate and assess and really create the foundation and the basis for procedural justice. Now, principles that provide values and standards, rules of behavior that guide ethical decision-making, as well as incentivize it. Next up is judgments. This is another quality. Are you aware of implicit bias and how it may show up in your own convictions? We have to have this conversation as leaders, as founders, all of the time, because when we look at people, when we hear someone speak, when we interact or engage with someone in their environment, we have our own implicit biases that come into the way that we determine what types of decisions that we make and what types of ways that we perceive those individuals that we're interacting with at that particular moment. We have to check that, because that is what determines sometimes how we treat people and how we respond to people. We have to make sure that as leaders, as founders, that we, in our own day-to-day interactions with individuals in our lives, we have to make sure that we are carrying forth the best practices, these evidence-based best practices of procedural justice. We're treating everyone fairly. We are considering the way that we make decisions is considering all of the information that we have at that particular moment. We're making the best decisions for the people that we employ, for the people that we ultimately are serving. The next quality here is associated costs. And this is where we're talking about differentiating between picking your brain and actually paying that consultant. Are you aware of implicit bias and how it may show up in who you pay for consulting services and who you don't? Now, as women, we deal with this all of the time. It doesn't matter what corner of the world you might be in. I cannot tell you how many times I talk to founders about their particular areas of expertise and how they're able to show up in the business world, how they're able to show up and how they're able to get visible and stay visible. Consulting provides a lot of that legitimacy that we need to be able to walk into certain rooms and have people listen to our opinions and our perspectives and our experience and value or qualify that experience as being just as valuable or just as impactful as someone else who might be a male, who might be also in the same industry. So we have to make sure that as founders, we are leading that as a best practice with our own businesses. So for example, within tacit growth strategies, we are always hiring consultants from the community. So we have people who may not have even finished their college education, but we will have them as vendors. When you look at our supply chain management, they will be within our information systems as vendors. And we have records of paying these particular individuals from the communities that which we say we serve. We have records showing that we have hired them as consultants. That is what we're talking about. That's an evidence-based best practice. No, it shouldn't be only a certain type of person or only a certain type of people who get afforded the opportunity to be hired as consultants. We have to make sure that we're distinguishing picking your brain from actually hiring this person as a consultant, because there's a lot of disrespect and there's a lot of harm done to a community of people when we continue this pick your brain practice. It hurts a lot of people, hurts a lot of families. The last one here is information systems. Procedural justice is non-existent without the integral interaction of hardware, software, databases, networks, and people. That is the foundation, of course, for management information systems, or MIS. When we talk specifically about procedural justice, especially as myself as a consultant, I ask my clients up front to give me access to their information systems. It doesn't matter if it's a customer relationship information system, if it's a manufacturing information system, a finance information system. It doesn't matter the type of information system. I need to be able to look to see what types of variances exist, why they exist, things of that sort. So we can talk about that another time. Now, here's a little bit of information about tacit growth strategies before we get out of here. Again, we are a leading management consulting project management office that serves both the public and private sectors. Our team provides expert process results-oriented consulting services with broad capabilities in project management, government contracting, procurement, and supply chain management, as well as grant and proposal writing, no matter the industry or geographic location. Our website is on this particular slide, but it's also on our final slide, which is at growthistacit.com. Our phone number is 210-904-0457 in the United States. Our email is info@growthistacit.com. And if you scan this page, this QR code, you'll go straight to our website. Thank you again for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you so much, Juana. That was a very powerful session. As you said, as visionary leaders, we have to focus on high ethical leadership and be leaders of change. Thank you so much for joining us today and supporting us in this event.